Football doesn't often produce nights that feel legendary while they're still unfolding. Yet this one carried that aura from the very first roar inside the Metropolitano Stadium. The noise wasn't just loud, it was charged, anticipatory, the kind of sound that seems to push players a step faster and make every tackle echo. What followed wasn't simply a victory, but a dismantling built on tactical precision as much as emotion. A performance where structure, intensity, and opportunity aligned so perfectly that the 4-0 scoreline felt less like exaggeration and more like a fair reflection of everything that unfolded on the pitch. It could have easily been a bigger score. Few expected what came next. Although Atletico de Madrid are renowned for resilience and competitive fire, overwhelming FC Barcelona so completely wasn't in most predictions. Yet from the opening seconds, it was clear one side had arrived sharper, more aggressive, and mentally faster. Every duel was contested like it might decide the tie, every loose ball chased as if it were the last touch of the match, and more often than not, Atletico emerged with possession. That superiority in micro-moments quietly established macro control. One of the most decisive elements was how Atletico interpreted pressing. Rather than defending passively, they alternated between a compact mid-block and sudden bursts of man-to-man pressure, squeezing space until short passing lanes vanished. For a possession-oriented side, that's suffocating. Each time Barcelona tried to circulate across the back line, a red and white shirt surged forward, forcing rushed decisions. The build-up phase was never calm, never clean, never comfortable. Their passing lacked usual sharpness, touches ran slightly heavy, and choices came a fraction too late, tiny delays that became fatal against an opponent playing at full throttle. Barcelona had arrived already carrying structural concerns. Missing key players like Pedri, Rafinha, and Marcus Rashford meant they lacked control between lines, unpredictability in tight spaces, and explosive depth runs. Their absence wasn't just noticeable, it shaped the entire tactical story. Without them, Barcelona looked disconnected and unusually inaccurate on the ball, their combinations lacking the rhythm that normally defines them. They also lost most of the physical duels across the pitch, a detail that perfectly illustrated how the contest tilted long before the scoreline reflected it. In possession, the visitors attempted structural solutions. Dani Olmo drifted inward from the left to act almost as an auxiliary playmaker, forming a narrow creative square with Marc Casado and central midfielders. The intention was to overload interior zones and progress through tight combinations. On paper, it made sense. In practice, it created a vulnerability elsewhere. Because Olmo tucked inside, width had to come from Alejandro Balde pushing high and wide. That left a vast corridor behind him, and Atletico turned that corridor into a tactical gold mine. Time and again, diagonal passes and quick transitions targeted that space, where runners arrived with momentum and no direct marker. Several of the clearest chances, and ultimately multiple goals, originated from that exact channel. It wasn't coincidence, it was calculated repetition. Once the weakness appeared, it was attacked relentlessly, movements timed so precisely that defenders were forced to turn toward their own goal while attackers sprinted forward facing it. One of the most uncomfortable defensive scenarios imaginable. The first goal came from a defensive mix-up involving Eric Garcia and goalkeeper Joan Garcia, but the mistake itself was only a symptom. The cause was pressure, relentless, coordinated, suffocating pressure. Passing lanes were sealed, angles disappeared, and hesitation crept in. By the time the ball crossed the line, the pattern had already been established. Atletico weren't just ahead, they were dictating the match's emotional and tactical tempo. What truly defined the half, though, was the performance of Antoine Griezmann. Even without the blistering acceleration of his early career, he demonstrated how football intelligence can dominate a game as decisively as raw speed. He drifted between the defenders, received with his back to goal, and released runners with perfectly weighted passes that sliced through Barcelona's defensive structure. His goal was a moment of pure class, sharp control, subtle adjustment, precise finish. It wasn't just a highlight, it was a summary of his understanding of rhythm, timing, and space. Around him, everything clicked. Marcos Llorente dictated tempo and covered ground relentlessly. The defensive line held firm, and Atletico's wide players stretched Barcelona until gaps inevitably opened. On the right flank especially, Giuliano Simone embodied the team's intensity. He pressed tirelessly both offensively and defensively, never stopping his runs, constantly harassing defenders, and repeatedly offering an outlet in transition. A huge percentage of Atletico's attacks flowed down his side, not only because of tactical design, but because of his relentless energy and willingness to sprint into space again and again. His work rate didn't just support the system, it amplified it, turning that flank into a constant source of danger. Movements across the team were synchronized, transitions were rapid, and execution was clinical. By halftime, it was already 4, and remarkably, it didn't feel shocking. If anything, the flow of chances suggested the margin could have been even larger. The second half shifted tone rather than direction. With such a lead, Atletico gradually transformed their shape into something closer to a 5-4-1 when defending, lines narrowing, distances shrinking, central lanes disappearing. It was game management in its purest form, not passive, simply controlled. Barcelona circulated possession but rarely found a path through. There were attempts to react. Ferran Torres drifted centrally searching for involvement, substitutions reshaped structure, and for brief spells, the ball moved faster. But each improvement was temporary because the underlying dilemma remained. Push forward and leave space, or slow down and get pressed. It was a tactical vice, tightening from both sides. A flicker of hope arrived when the net rippled after a set piece, only for a long review to rule the goal offside. The delay cooled momentum and tension alike. When play resumed, urgency had faded, and with it much of the belief. Soon after, the dismissal of Eric Garcia tilted the balance even further, extinguishing any realistic hope of a comeback. Atletico regained full control, choosing their pressing moments carefully and closing spaces with calm authority. What made the night endure wasn't only the margin or the highlights. It was the sensation that one team solved every puzzle the match presented, while the other kept searching for answers that never came. Tactical clarity, physical sharpness, emotional intensity all aligned on one side. For Atletico supporters, it instantly became the kind of performance that enters club folklore, the sort recalled years later with the same vivid detail. Even with a 4-goal advantage, the return leg may yet bring drama. Barcelona's attacking talent is always capable of the extraordinary. But whatever happens next, this first encounter already belongs to Atletico's history. Sometimes football gives you tension, sometimes it gives you spectacle, and sometimes, like on this unforgettable night in Madrid, it gives you a performance so complete that it feels less like a match and more like a symphony, one conducted in red and white, played at full volume, and destined to echo long after the final whistle. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. Leave in the comments what would you like me to talk about on the next video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Turn on the notification bell so you will never miss an upload. I'll see you in the next one.